You're listening to the Modern Mainframe, BMC's intelligent Z optimization and transformation podcast, covering the latest trends and issues on the mainframe and how BMC AIME and BMC Compuware Solutions can help you build a mainframe-inclusive DevOps toolchain. Hi there, welcome to the Modern Mainframe. I'm Matt Dallaire. These days, there's an ever-increasing number of cross-platform applications, as well as market pressure to deliver new applications and services at a faster pace than ever before. To remain competitive, organizations must ensure that their mainframes are just as agile and adaptive as other platforms. With that in mind, today we're discussing a BMC E-book, 10 Steps to True Mainframe Agility. Joining me are the book's authors, BMC Lead Product Manager Mark Schettenhelm, DevOps Architect and Evangelist Tony Anter, Solutions Architect Frank Rhodes, and Senior Product Manager Kevin Corbett. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
So I'd like to start off with a little background on the subject. Mark, for the past 7 years, you've been advocating mainframe agility. Why was it important 7 years ago, and why is it still important today?
Yeah, it's a good question because the mainframe, I think, the platforms evolved so much over the decades, but many of the development practices did not. And what we saw, it's been at least 7 years ago, is a real problem with the divide between things going on in the distributed world, which had evolved at a great pace, very quickly, developing software, high quality software, and the mainframe side was just stuck in a waterfall. And the problem was people couldn't deliver code quick enough because the mainframe was holding them back. And we really saw that as a real crisis, and it really threatens the future of the mainframe. So we looked at the processes, did a lot of research and working with teams and understanding what distributed teams did to have success and how that could be applied to the mainframe. And at the time, a lot of people said it was impossible, there's no way. From this, we really identified 10 things, 10 steps that would be essential to master to move forward with DevOps and agile on the mainframe. And that's what we've been promoting, and that's why we have this ebook to talk about those and how you can get the success that we've had working with many organizations around the world and how you can bring that to your organization. Break down the silos, unite mainframe and distributed development practices, and move forward with much higher quality software, faster delivery, and really revitalize mainframe developer experience.
Tony, you have experience with implementing these steps. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, as Mark said, before we had this, there was chaos. And once we started looking at modernizing mainframe application development, we basically followed these 10 steps. This was a roadmap, a guideline. So when I went through this with the organization that I used to be with, Fortune 100 American credit card company, we absolutely went down logically these 10 steps and followed this pathway to get to where we're going. And at the end of the day, we transformed our entire mainframe platform, hundreds of applications, thousands of engineers, onto this new modernized DevOps-enabled platform that just was goodness. So these 10 steps are your guide. This is, the first question you ask whenever you undertake something. What's the first step? Where do I begin? What's point one? And that's what these 10 steps are. It shows you how to go through this piece by piece by piece.
Okay, and with that, I'll list the 10 steps. Number 1 is determine your current and desired state, followed by modernize your mainframe development environment. Number 3, adopt automated testing. Provide developers with graphical, intuitive visibility into existing code and data structure. Number 5 is empower developers at all skill and experience levels to deliver high-quality code with less friction. Number 6, initiate training and adoption of agile processes. 7, leverage operational data across the development, testing, and production lifecycle. Number 8, deploy true agile DevOps enabling source code management. 9, automate deployment of code into production. And finally, number 10, enable coordinated cross-platform continuous delivery. So I have a few questions about the individual steps. So step 1 is determining your current and desired state. Tony, why is it important to know where you stand and where you want to go? It sounds simple, but is it really?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I don't want to sound cliche, but how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you're at?
All right.
Right? So you need to plan out and be honest about what is your current state? What is your current capability? What's working and what's not working? Be ruthless in your review of what your current state is so that then you can map out what is your future state. Where is your nirvana? Where do you want to go? If you don't understand that those current few steps and your current capabilities, you're never going to be able to improve for the future. You're never going to be able to make that change. And when I say ruthless, I mean ruthless. It has to be ruthless observation of where you are at now, and be honest with where are the warts, where are the fleas, where are the things that aren't working.
How do you go about that? How do you determine where the issues are?
You need to do a review of all your systems. You need to sit down and map out what is your process today, going all the way from the business has an idea on to I've deployed into production and now I start my validation. You need to go through and go through app by app. You can start out with the 80-20 rule and look at, what is the common process across 80% of your applications, and then deal with the corner cases or deal with the exception cases later. But you need to sit down and map that out. And BMC can help you with that, right? That's one of the things we do is we come in and help you assess what that current state is, so that then you can understand and plan out what your future capabilities should be.
Okay, moving on to step 3, I had a question about automated testing. Mark, why should developers test in small increments, and how does automation help?
Yeah, 2 questions there, but
All
they
right.
do tie together. The first one is the small increments, and that's really huge, because when sites start to go with Agile and they start doing 2-week sprints, they can speed up their development. They're going to see that they are going to develop faster, but then the problem becomes testing, right? And if it takes you 3 weeks to test things that come out of a 2-week sprint, you have a real problem. So one of the first things that you really have to resolve is the testing. You want to make it automated, because manual testing takes your developer time when they should be coding. Automate it. And when you automate it, you really want to break it into small increments. And you should have small stories anyway for your development. But don't wait till the end. Don't wait till the end of the sprint to test the whole thing, because that puts you over. Don't wait until the end of the project to test. Test the smallest increments possible, because if there's a problem, you can fix it right away, and they're much easier to automate. So those 2 things, which may seem difficult to implement, but they're really not, are key to the success really of going to DevOps and Agile, and a key part of the 10 steps.
Yeah, a key point there too, Mark, and you made it, but I want to make sure people understand it, is that we're sprinting in 2 weeks, have 2-week sprints going. So what that means is we're doing a limited amount of work. We're not developing the entire application in 2 weeks. So you only want to be testing the code that you're actually writing and delivering. And that customers have a tendency to say, I'm just going to test the whole thing. But in reality, it slows you down, and it doesn't produce the quality you're looking for. So just test the code that you're writing and delivering in that 2-week sprint. And as Mark said, it'll speed you up, and you'll meet your goals much more readily.
Great thing, Kevin, that you added, because I don't think I really hit that. And that's true. You want to do like stub it out. Okay, is that good? Before, make sure that each part of your foundation and what you're building is good before you put more on. And that could be every day you're running little tests to make sure that I've got this. Okay, before I go on, is that good? Now is this good? Now I'm going to add this. And it is a different mindset than, I'll just wait till the whole thing's together, because that's too late.
Well, really, it's taking the mindset of you're applying the same principles across the entire process instead of just saying, well, we need agile development, but testing is going to stay waterfall. You want to bring everything together.
Right.
Good point. When you go agile, when a company decides they're going to be agile and implement DevOps practices, the entire company really needs to be agile. It's not just your developers. It's not just your testers. It's the entire organization.
Part of the automated testing, sometimes, a lot of these applications are accessing DB2 on the mainframe. So the developers, it's important that they also do, if they modify any of their SQL, those queries, validate those queries. You can automate access path validation on that to ensure that you didn't just write something that's going to cause problems when you get to production. If you're going to have bad access paths, find out in dev, fix those so you don't have that go forward. A lot of times the SQL is forgotten. It's like the code. Did they get the code right? But ensuring that the SQL is able to get you the data you need in a timely manner is critical for your application.
That's a nice segue into my next question, which was in some past podcasts, I've heard the exhortation or the advice, don't forget the data. So how do you determine which data is right to use and how much data should you be using?
Well, another really good question, because again, what we've seen over the course of the years, and it doesn't make any difference whether we're talking DSAM files, DB2 tables, IMS databases, customers have a hard time understanding what their data is because they've got so much of it, and you've got newer developers and things such as that. But really, what you want to do is you want to be able to focus in on, what is it I really need to test, and you need to make sure that you have just the right amount of data to do that so that you can test more rapidly, right? It's extremely important that you have some kind of a tool that can help you identify what kind of data do I need. And of course, we have tools that can help you do that. There are other tools out there that can help you do that, but it's absolutely necessary that you understand what your data is and what data you need to test. But again, there are ways that you can do that, and it really helps speed up the entire process.
So, Frank, I think you've touched on this a little bit, but moving on to step 4 in the 10 steps, it's provide developers with graphical, intuitive visibility into existing code and data structures. So why is it important to have this visibility into both the code and the related data?
Well, if you think about it, if you're going to start saving a new telephone number away in your application, you have to modify the code to be able to handle that telephone number, but you also have to modify your data structures to where you're going to be storing that telephone number. And you can't push out either one of those changes without the other. Both of them are needed to be able to validate the code, to do that automated testing that we just talked about, and to ensure that everything is working the way that you're expecting. So having the developer be able to modify their code, change the particular data structure environment, and roll that forward so that they can do their testing is critical because they're both needed.
And remember, don't forget the data. It's a new column in a DB2 table, or it's a new field in a file. You have to put data in it in order to test it.
Very good. True.
I can tell you from experience, the single biggest failure I see when we're talking about automated testing, you can have the greatest automated test in the world. Your automated test can dance and sing and, pour you a drink. But if you don't have proper data, if you don't have the right data, if you don't understand how your data works, then the test case is invalid. That you won't be able to have true automated testing. So at every failure or most of the failures that I've seen in automated testing and automated testing test plans come from lack of or inconsistent data.
And oftentimes that's because the customer or the customer just doesn't know what their data is. Maybe they've acquired another company. Maybe you've got new developers on the project. They just don't understand it. So a tool that can show you what your inputs and outputs are can help narrow down what kind of data I need in order to do this testing.
So, Mark, step 8 is deploy true agile DevOps enabling source code management. And I'm sure this is especially true when developers are working on the same application concurrently. Can you talk about the importance of source code management?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I can tell you've definitely read the book, because that is the real problem, is having developers working on the same application concurrently. What sites find is the source control management system they may have had for Agile was okay, but when you start to speed up things, you really need something better. You need something that one person can work on the code in one path, and someone else can work on that same program in a parallel path, and maybe a third one. You can't say, oh, you're using that? Okay, I'll wait until you're done, and then I'll go and make my changes. That doesn't work in a 2-week sprint. So you really need something that has totally separate development paths for mainframe code. And you also need source code management that can tie into all the automation, because source code management's at the key of the workflow and all the tasks. So checking out code, compiling the code, promoting the code, deploying the code, the testing, those are all things that are triggers, which can be webhooks, for pipelines, which then can go in and do things like code quality checks, automated testing. Since the source code management's at the heart of everything the developer does, it's the perfect place to provide integration points. So you really need source code management that allows you to do multiple code paths, that is open so that it can integrate with DevOps pipelines for all these other tools that allow for automation, especially for the deploy, so that deploy can work with your distributed deploy and you can deploy at the same time.
Yeah, not to be too cliches, but I guess I'm full of cliches today. You have to have a solid base to build anything. And source code management is the base of your DevOps, and it's the base of everything that you're doing.
I think I'd add also that, having a great source code management system is fantastic. And of course, we can help there. But I think it's also important that it's integrated, different integrated than Mark was talking about, integrated with all of the other tooling that you need. So everything in one place. You can do program analysis and look at data. You can, anything that you need to do to make yourself successful, have it in an integrated development environment is, I think, a huge plus in this case.
Yeah, having more things at the developer's fingertips, not making them hop from tool to tool to check different things, because if they need to do that, a lot of times they'll skip those steps. So if you have it all available from the first UI, you're able to have them do more and different types of validation from the one location.
Right, Frank, well said. I wish I'd have said it as well as you did.
Okay, I wanted to talk about one more step, step 9, automation of code deployment. Tony, why is automation of code deployment a crucial piece of the journey, and can you achieve true mainframe agility without it?
No, it's a simple question with a simple answer. You cannot. Code deployment is essential because deploying an artifact onto your infrastructure, especially when you're talking about production, there's a lot more to that than just, issuing an FTP command and moving a binary onto a box. There's a lot of pieces to it. There's a lot of things that need to be automated, and all those are a big time sink. All of those will take time if you don't have those steps automated. 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there, and 5 minutes for this and 5 minutes for that, and 2 minutes to stop your application, and another 5 minutes to deploy it. All those pieces they add up, and if you don't have an automated mechanism for deployment, an automated mechanism for deployment includes validating that you have all the proper approvals, validating that all your change management stuff is in place, validating that, your system is ready and it's there. You don't know how many times you get to the point of deployment and all of a sudden something comes up. There's not an approval in place. There's, your infrastructure, all of a sudden something's gone down and you can't actually deploy. Having all those pieces automated and the ability to deploy and or roll back is essential. It's like again, I'm going to use another analogy since, like I said, I'm full of them today. It's like a stool. You have to have every leg of the stool in order to be able to sit down properly. It's the same thing here.
And just in regards, going back to like the automation in general, and we talked about the concurrent development, if you are doing these steps manually as you deploy, you're probably sitting there waiting for each one to complete before you start the next one, and that's keeping you from other work you could be doing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's you have this super fast race car and you're driving it through a neighborhood with tons of stop signs. It's just you're not getting the benefit out of it that you can. I'm just going to keep the analogies coming, man.
I like it. Okay, so now that we've covered some of the steps in particular, is it necessary to do all 10 of the steps, and do they need to be done in order? And Tony, I'll go right back to you with that.
Yes. I mean, you could do some steps in parallel. Not every, it doesn't all have to be sequential, but there's a reason we put this pathway together and there's 10 steps. So yes, you pretty much have to do all 10 steps, or at least touch on all 10 steps, in order to get a full end-to-end DevOps capability and to optimize what you're doing. There's no easy roads to success, man.
I think what Tony said is right, that you have to do all 10 and they're in an order, but you could do some of them in parallel. You can work on all 10, but like the first step in particular, you have to do your assessment first, really, before you would move on to any of the other steps to figure out where you are. Then you can go in and start to look at automated testing, your source code management. Things like that could be done in parallel, but they build on each other when you do them sequentially.
Also, with the 10 steps, I was going to say, just with the 10 steps, I think as you go through, you may not do each step to 100% completion, but you can then go back and revisit it as you're adopting your process. You can be agile in your adoption of the steps. You can go back and do pieces as you go forward and then add to it as, okay, you realize there's a hole here. I need to fix this. And, this is the hole maybe where the developer's UI. Let's see what we can do to fix that to make it better and improve that step.
That's a great point, Frank.
I think a step, and we didn't talk about it today, but I think an important thing is if your organization has made the decision that you want to practice DevOps and you really want to be agile, don't skimp on the training. You have to have training so that people understand what agile truly means and that you follow that process. Because if you don't, you're going to have teams doing things differently. And in my mind, then you're not going to be 100% successful in reaching your journey.
It's another great point. Is there any step that people tend to skip or overlook?
Yeah, step 1. Okay. You don't know how many times I've seen people just try to start marching forward towards a goal or their vision of a goal without truly understanding what their system does or how it works. So if there is any one step that you quote unquote have to do sequentially, it's step 1. If you don't have a plan, then you're just flying by the seat of your pants.
Tony, can you share a success story from your experience implementing these 10 steps?
Yeah, it's exactly what we started off the podcast with, which is, I work for a major American credit card company, Fortune 100, and we had a problem with 2-speed IT. The mainframe was going one speed and the distributed side was going the other. And my management came to me and said, we need to get these two platforms aligned. And, I'm not going to say we invented mainframe DevOps. I don't think anybody quote unquote invented it, but we were probably amongst the first. And, we didn't know where to get started, where to begin. So this provided us a pathway, a guided tour of what should we be looking at, what should we do, and how should we implement this. And using that, we were able to transform the mainframe application platform from an old legacy waterfall system into a new agile system that plugged into our modern DevOps pipelines. And we were able to do that. We were able to transform the entire company. And like I said, the scope of that was hundreds of applications, thousands of engineers, and we were able to do all this and get it set up inside of a year, basically 1 year. That's not a guarantee everybody can do it in a year, but that's how long it took us.
Wow. It's a good testimonial. So finally, we have a wealth of experience on the panel covering different areas of software development and even different platforms. I'd like to go around and ask each of you, based on your experience, what's your key takeaway from this ebook? And Frank, I'll start with you.
I guess for me, one of the main things is you need to have the right tools available to you so you can automate and so that you can, I'm coming from a DB2 background, so that you can, for me, linking your code changes with whatever your database changes need to be. That's critical because if you could only handle one side of that, and then you have to send off a request to another group to handle the other pieces, that's going to be problematic for you. It's going to slow things down and it's going to break that agile, viewpoint. So really being able to allow the developers to do those different things at one time is critical, and having the tools that they need to do it.
Kevin?
Boy, oh boy, you're picking on me next. That's good though, because I'm kind of leaping off of what Frank said. I think that, and we've said it throughout this podcast, that automated testing is a must. It's critical for each and every phase of the product. And automating that testing and leveraging your operational data is really an extremely important piece. It's not easy though. It's hard. Understanding what data you need isn't you can't just snap your fingers and get data. You can't go push a button and generate this data. What we have found is that using production data privatized, so desensitized. So that's another part of the tooling that we didn't really talk about, right. But it's a must, because that operational data that your company runs on today is the same data that you need to be testing with in a unit test, in a integration test, whatever the testing is. That's the kind of data you need. But it's a difficult task. But I think those are two things from the book that I drive home, because I come from more of the data side, data background. So I'm looking at that. But and this is cliche. Every one of the steps is important, and as we've said, don't skip them. Look at them and be very critical of yourselves when you're evaluating and implementing a plan.
Kevin, be careful with those cliches.
I stole one from you.
It's contagious. Mark, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I think it's having a framework and having these 10 steps, because I know working with a lot of organizations, this all seems very scary. I think that, like Tony said, it's chaos, but it seems like you're asking a lot and it's all over the place and you don't know where to go and which should I work on next. Having these 10 steps gives me a framework, and I can look at each 10 and say, well, have I completed step 1? Good. How am I doing in step 3? How am I doing in step 5? Having that framework to work with your teams in some way to discuss it and how you're doing in those areas and measuring it makes a big difference. It makes it a lot easier because you can focus on each step at a time rather than just some big blob of it. And it's actually an introduction into moving from a big blob of waterfall into a more structured agile and DevOps experience.
And finally, Tony, do you have any analogies to add?
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna paint you a picture here, Matt.
Okay.
the biggest takeaway I had from the ebook when I first read it was the path to success is now paved. You don't have to sort of chop your way through the jungle to figure out what you need to do and how you need to do it. The steps that you need to take and the areas that you need to focus on have all been laid out for you. And it's not just a, hey, has anyone done this? Can I do this? Is this even possible? It absolutely is possible. And people have done it. And here are the steps that they've used to get there. So you can plan this out, you can do this, and you can push forward with this. And there are people like myself and others who have followed the steps in this ebook and followed them to success. So the thing that I took away from it was, here's my roadmap. Now that I have a roadmap, there's no reason I can't do it. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy peasy. It just means that now you have a plan. And if you have a plan, you can accomplish anything.
That's a good point to end it. I could go on asking questions all day because I have several more. But in the interest of time, Frank, Kevin, Tony, Mark, thanks again for joining us today. It was a really great conversation.
Well, you're more than welcome.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
So I'll include a link to the 10 Steps to Mainframe Agility ebook and some other helpful links in the show notes. Thank you to everyone listening, and we'll talk to you next time on The Modern Mainframe. You're listening to The Modern Mainframe, BMC's intelligent Z optimization and transformation podcast, covering the latest trends and issues on the mainframe and how BMC AIME and BMC CompuWare Solutions can help you build a mainframe-inclusive DevOps toolchain.